Hi, Corbin and Boaz, it's Honey. And this book might be a few years too old for you, but it's one of my favorites. And as we're getting ready for Christmas, I figured it might not hurt for you guys to hear this. The book is called Jacob's Gift. It's written by Max Lucado and illustrated by Robert Hunt. As you can tell, the people in this picture are not from your time, or even when I was a little girl. These people are dressed in clothes that indicate it's a very, very, very long time ago. Listen while I read the story of Jacob's gift. Rabbi Simeon brushed the sawdust off his hands and began untying his apron. Before you leave today, I have a special announcement. He hung the apron on a wooden peg and turned to look at the handful of boys in his shop. All but one apprentice had removed their aprons and put away their tools. Rabbi Simeon looked across the workshop. Only one boy continued sawing on a piece of wood. "Jacob, our work is finished for the day. Put away your tools." Jacob didn't respond. The only sound he heard was the swish, swish of the saw. And now, swish, swish was the only sound anyone heard. But Jacob didn't know that. The other boys in the shop began to snicker. That means laugh, just in case you didn't know. Rabbi Simeon let out a deep sigh and shook his head, but he wasn't mad. Deep down inside, he was very pleased. He, too, knew what it was like to get lost in the world of woodworking. But it was time to go home. "Jacob!" the rabbi called again, his voice a bit louder this time. The sawing stopped. When Jacob heard no other noise, he knew he'd done it again. Slowly, he placed his saw on the table. He said softly, "I'm sorry, Rabbi." Rabbi Simeon smiled and said, "It's all right. Put away your tools and hang up your apron." Jacob quickly cleaned off his work area. With a sigh, he stood and walked across the room, never looking up. This was the part he disliked the most. Everyone was looking at him. He hung up his apron as the other boys continued to snicker. Jacob's cheeks burned. Finally, the rabbi spoke and all eyes turned back to him. "As I said earlier, my nephew from Nazareth should be here within a few days. He's a master carpenter who knows quality work. He will help me select one of you for a special task. The one who builds the best project will work with me on the new synagogue." "It will be me!" These words were so strong in Jacob's thoughts that he worried he'd spoken them out loud. Only days earlier, he'd overheard the rabbi saying, "Just leave Jacob alone with the wood and he can do almost anything." Jacob had turned red that day, but it had been with pride. Jacob thought in his head, "I must be chosen. I want to use my hands to help build God's house. It doesn't matter that everyone says I'm so shy. This time—" "Jacob, did you hear what I said?" No, sir." "I'll be away for the next 3 days, but all of you may use the workshop to finish your projects." As the others began to leave, the rabbi asked Jacob to stay. Again, Jacob felt his cheeks grow warm. He waited till everyone had left and then approached the carpenter. "I'm sorry, Rabbi," he apologized. "I'll do better next time." The rabbi motioned for Jacob to sit. "Oh, Jacob, you've done nothing wrong. I asked you to stay so I could tell you something." The rabbi smiled, pulled up a stool, and sat down. He placed one big hand on Jacob's shoulder and said, "God has given you the gift of woodworking, Jacob. What is difficult for many is easy for you. Surely you've noticed that." Jacob nodded slowly. He had wondered why other boys struggled with wood to make things that seemed so simple to him. God gives gifts, Jacob. Some can sing, some can teach, and you can build. You have a special gift. Have you ever wondered why God gave you this gift? So I can learn to be a good carpenter? Well, the rabbi chuckled, not exactly. God gave you this gift to share with others. Let's say you give a present to one of my daughters. How do you think that would make me feel? Happy? Of course, even though you gave the gift to my child, I would feel like you'd given it to me. God is like that too. When we give a gift to one of his children, it's like giving a gift to God. If you ever have a chance to help someone, remember what I told you. Now, run home and tell your father that I hope he has an inn full of guests next week. That evening, at supper, Jacob's father reminded him of the days ahead. We're expecting a lot of business, son. I'll get up early, promised Jacob. I'll work on my project in the mornings and help you in the evenings. The next 3 mornings, Jacob crawled out of bed while it was still dark and went to the workshop. With a fire going and a lamp burning, he worked hard to complete his project. What does it look like he's building? What do you think? The other boys had laughed when he told them what he was going to build, but now that it was almost finished, they weren't laughing anymore. Jacob was building a new kind of animal feed trough. His would have wheels. He got the idea while watching some men work in the stable next to his father's inn. They loaded a wagon full of hay, rolled it into the shed, and then dumped it into the trough. Jacob thought to himself, why not put wheels right on the trough? And that's what Jacob was planning to do. Jacob had returned to the workshop after helping his father at the inn one evening. He thought to himself, Rabbi Simeon will be here tomorrow. I must finish tonight. Jacob looked at the trough and was so sleepy, and then he looked at the 4 wheels piled on his workbench. Oh, I have so much to do. Maybe if I just close my eyes for a few minutes. What do you think is going to happen? In what seemed like the very next moment, a beam of starlight slipped through a crack in the workshop and fell across Jacob's napping eyes. What? He shouted, startled by the sudden light. He had slept through the night? Had he really? Then he looked out and saw that the village was showered by a gleaming, shimmering light in the sky. Jacob rubbed the sleep from his eyes as he walked outside and toward the star that seemed to dance in the sky in the direction of his father's inn. Then he heard a strange sound in the stable behind him. Quietly, Jacob crept closer. The tiniest of newborns was on the ground, a baby. Beside the baby knelt his mother. A man gently covered her with his cloak. Oh, goodness, thought Jacob. The baby must be so uncomfortable on the ground. Quickly, Jacob turned and raced back to the workshop. He stood beside his newly built feed trough. He had measured each board so carefully, cut each piece with skill. He had oiled it with care. It was the best work Jacob had ever done, and tomorrow the rabbi would select the best apprentice. But tonight, there's a new baby who doesn't have a place to sleep, he thought to himself. The next morning, the rabbi walked in the workshop. Good morning! This is the big day, boys! Jacob approached the rabbi. Sir, I need to tell you something. Later, Jacob, we need to get everything ready for my nephew. Here, help me. The rabbi's voice drifted off as he began to take the projects outside. An unfinished chair, a desk with one leg that was too short, and a wobbly stool. Then, looking at a stack of 4 wheels, he said, "Jacob, where is your project?" "That's what I tried to tell you. Something happened. There was a big star." And at that moment, "Uncle Simeon! Joseph!" Simeon shouted, extending his arms to hug the young man. "I'm so glad you're here." Jacob's eyes widened. This was the man he had seen with the baby in the stable the night before. With one arm still around Joseph, the rabbi turned to Jacob. "Jacob, this is my nephew from Nazareth." Jacob was too surprised to speak, so Joseph spoke in his place. "We've already met, Uncle Simeon. In fact, Jacob gave my newborn son his very first gift." "Your son? What son? Where is he?" "Come here, I'll show you." And the rabbi and Jacob hurried behind Joseph. Joseph led them around a curve and down a hill towards the inn. "Did you stay at the inn, Joseph?" "Not quite, it was too full." "Then where did you stay?" asked Rabbi Simeon. "You'll see," said Joseph, as he led them past the inn to the bottom of the hill. There he left the path and turned toward a shelter. "The stable?" asked Simeon. "You kept your baby in a stable?" Joseph smiled and placed his finger on his lips. "Quiet, Uncle. They're asleep. Follow me." He ducked his head and entered the stable. A cow mooed at the presence of the trio. Jacob stepped next to the trough and motioned, Joseph stepped next to the trough with his baby in it and motioned for them to approach. When the rabbi and his student Jacob looked inside, they saw a beautiful newborn baby. "Oh, look at this. His name is Jesus," Joseph whispered, "and he has a cradle fit for a king." Joseph's kindness made Jacob's cheeks turn bright red, but he felt so good seeing the baby asleep in the feed trough he had made. "Now I see why your project is missing," said the rabbi, "and this is the finest project I have ever seen. But tell me, why did you decide to give away your feed trough?" Jacob smiled with delight. "I remembered what you said, Rabbi. When you give a gift to one of God's children, you're giving a gift to God," said the boy. The rabbi's voice was soft. "And so you have, my son, so you have."